Welcome to the Weekly. I'm Jeremy, and this week we are without Chris. There was unfortunately a positive COVID test at the workplace, so there's going to be a little social distancing, a little self quarantine, just to make sure. So not Chris, but a coworker tested positive. So everyone's being careful, and so we decided it's probably better just to not meet in person. If we can figure out a remote version of this, we can try that. But so this week it will just be me. And so our topics for this week: the Pixar movie spawns a D&D clone. Jeff Goldblum plays an elf sorcerer, and the writers unite to make Disney pay. And lastly, the D&D movie Reboot begins filming. So let's start with this kind of odd piece. So Pixar's Onward was a film that was released right before movie theaters shut down. So for a lot of people, I think in North America, it was the last movie they actually saw in theaters, except for some of the revivals and things that they tried to get people to go see in the theaters. But the last of the normal kind of Disney releases. And in that, so if you haven't seen it, which maybe a lot of people haven't because it was very it was very unattended, and I think it went to Disney Plus shortly after that. It has never been released in Japan, interestingly, so it's still coming. So I had to fire up the VPN to actually see what this movie was all about. But it's an odd one. It's the director of Monster University, I think, and it was a kind of a real personal story, but it seemed like it was trying to take advantage of the maybe success of fantasy tabletop RPGs or Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. So the story was about a world that was magical and had all the fantasy races in it, and slowly they discovered science and electricity, and they forgot magic. So that kind of story, but the setting and the character design and everything was really ugly, like suburban store brand fantasy looking. It was it's not great. The character design was a little weak, and everything just was kind of depressing. It was like Orange County, Dungeons and Dragons. It was really, really ugly, very suburban and very strange. And I won't spoil any of the plot or anything, but one of the center pieces of the game is the older brother's obsession with what they call in the game, what they call in the movie, Quests of Yore. So Quests of Yore is that universe's version of Dungeons and Dragons. So now OP Games has announced that they are releasing a physical version of this game. So they are going to to emulate you were only seen. So in the beginning of the movie, a table is set up with an ongoing campaign of this Quests of Yore. The strange thing about the movie is we never see the gaming group. The character that is obsessed with this game doesn't appear to have any friends. And there's, hints that they're very unpopular and kind of a loser. But it's odd that they were playing such a social game that you would meet at a, kitchen table to play with no friends. It was very odd. So Barley's the name of that character. So Quest of Yore, Barley's Edition, is this version, is a real life version of this game from the movie. So the interesting thing about it is if you remove the plastic from the game, all the branding goes away so that it looks exactly like it appeared in the film. So, it says, Pixar's Onward and, the publishing company and everything. But that comes off on the plastic. So you do have something that looks actually like a prop from the film. And so the voice actor, so Barley, the older brother, is played by Chris Pratt, and Ian, the younger brother, is Tom Holland. And they give really kind of mediocre performances. What they're doing with those characters is very generic. The Chris Pratt character is kind of like Barley is kind of like a Jack Black light. It's really odd. But anyhow, enough of a movie review. But this is a really odd thing that they produced. And unfortunately, because the movie wasn't so popular, maybe they had, were hoping that it was going to, with all of the actual play fans and people that had interest in Dungeons and Dragons, that this would be something fun for them to play. It would be a way to introduce very young kids to what a fantasy setting could be or what it's kind of about. But it doesn't really do any of those things particularly well. But this actual set contains an 84-page player's guide, a 135-page tome of quests, 16 polyhedral dice, and 151 cards. But that's not all. It's a bunch of cardboard tokens and terrain tiles. I guess it's hex-based terrain tiles, a Game Master screen, and 9 full-color double-sided character sheets. And one more thing, 6 miniatures that were inspired by the kind of fantasy races that they showed, kind of like maybe elves, pixies, the very standard type of fantasy races that were depicted in the film. So all of that for $50. And so it's odd. It's a really odd thing. I would like to actually see it, and it might be fun to talk. You can see on the desk here, maybe it's a little hard to see, but the Rick and Morty branded D&D set that was released. There's a lot. They did a Stranger Things and, a lot of branding of maybe popular IPs to kind of, lead people to D&D. This isn't D&D though. It's just a kind of a clone. So it's a dice pool system, and which is a shame because 5e is probably the dominant, most popular system, it would make sense. Maybe they just couldn't make the licensing deal, but it would make sense to use them to bring people into that system. If parents were using the movie to bring kids into the understanding of what a fantasy setting was, and then you would then be able to teach them a system you already know. But this is a totally new system. This is their original system. That is a dice pool system using different polyhedral dice, and the same way in some settings where when you upgrade things, so maybe you're rolling a d4 for some weapon or something, and when it's upgraded or when you get a better version, it'll be a d6 and then it'll be a d8. So that's how you determine kind of leveling up and power in the game. So yeah, really interesting idea, and unfortunately maybe they made that deal or they started the production before kind of things hit, and because it was already executed, it was already maybe in the queue for production, this thing actually got produced. So it's going to be released on May 12th, and we will see if anybody even notices it, because now that movie's been gone for more than a year and just kind of floating around on Disney Plus. But a really odd artifact and kind of a missed opportunity. And I think the movie also missed an opportunity to really be another example, kind of like Stranger Things was, or the scene in E.T. with the older brothers game group, to show a game group and some dynamics and have it be kind of a funny thing that a fantasy setting that lost its magic still has characters playing a fantasy setting. And the kind of joke in the movie itself is Quests of Yore is historically accurate. So the Barley is always telling people that this is a historically accurate tabletop game because it's based on their own worlds, like previous fantasy, the magic and everything that was lost. So they can actually go to the places in the actual tabletop game. They can go to those places in the real world, and some of them have changed and some of them become other businesses and things. But yeah, it's a real odd one, and it's interesting that it's coming out now in 2021. So if you were a fan of that film, or if you thought that might be a fun way, you've got kids that are constantly watching it on Disney Plus, it might be a fun way to show them what role playing can be like. So I don't know. I mean, it seems like it should be family friendly and kind of younger kid friendly, but I guess that all depends. But in the film, of course, there wasn't anything particularly scary or gory, so just the usual tropes. So that was Quests of Yore, Barley's edition, for $50 on May 12th. Yeah, who knows? But so the actual play. So Jeff Goldblum it was just announced that he will be playing an elf sorcerer in an actual play. So this is an audio-only podcast called Dark Dice. And I guess, they it seems like they hire some pretty competent, pretty established voice actors. But I think this is probably going to be the biggest celebrity. And of course, this is attracting a lot of attention. So May 12th, again, everything is May 12th. So May 12th, the second season of their campaign called The Long March on the Dark Dice podcast will begin. So an audio-only podcast. And they advertise it as a horror podcast that centers on the Dungeons & Dragons universe. So it's said to have, I haven't heard it myself, but it's said to have really high production quality. So, of course, they must have some sort of budget. They must have audio engineers and things. And if they're hiring that kind of talent, they're going to be union, so they're going to have to be paid. So it's, the campaign so far is 6 travelers that set forth on a journey into the ruinous domain of a nameless god. So that's where we are so far. And so the reviews have been pretty positive of the first season. People have said, they edit out the natural pauses that come in playing the game itself, and they re-record NPC voices with trained voice actors. So maybe they replace what happened at the tabletop and just use that as a script to then do audio production, which is interesting. I think there were some examples of early D&D doing that, and I don't know if they released it on cassette or it was actually like a radio play. But that does seem to make, because then you can also make adjustments, like, in your improvisation, your kind of stutters and kind of odd word choices, you can smooth out if you rewrite what NPCs said. So they re-record the NPC dialogue with professional voice actors. They score the whole thing. There's Foley work, and they have an orchestra with more than 30 medieval instruments and a live 40-person choir singing in Icelandic, Elvish, and other languages. So this is not a cheap production. So it may be worth checking out to kind of see the furthest. So unlike Critical Role, where it's kind of it feels more like a stage performance and you kind of get into the personalities and you enjoy watching the people, this is going to be a very elaborately, kind of elegantly produced audio podcast actual play. And now they're hiring, recognizable, interesting voices. So who knows what that's actually going to mean. So the ante has been upped. I mean, it's the bar is being raised continually. So it's interesting as more and more people, if you're thinking about doing an actual play, what you're competing with or what you're trying to get attention from is completely different. And I think there's also different ways that people want to enjoy it. They may be not so much into the game. They want to enjoy the story. They want to enjoy the performance. And just, if this is highly produced and orchestrated, it may be very, wonderful to listen to, even if you're not really paying attention or have been following the campaign just as an audio drama. But they are using D&D, and I guess they house rule combat. So they homebrewed rules for player versus player combat. So to kind of maybe smooth things out, and so that there's no big lulls. And I guess because they're pre-recording it and editing it, you can kind of fix those things anyhow. But they use some homebrew rules to kind of make things go a little bit easier. So that is Dark Dice, the Dark Dice podcast. And so May 12th, the second season with Jeff Goldblum starring as a elf sorcerer. It's not clear whether he will be playing just an NPC. He will be one of these re-recorded NPC voices, or is actually playing, because the description was is a member of a party that meets the existing party. So I don't know if they're adding characters and adding voices, or if this is just purely like an NPC performance. I can't imagine getting him to sit down through a session and play through characters. And they're kind of a little bit vague about that. So maybe they want you to listen to the first episode just to find out exactly. And then you're going to, discover, oh, he's just a pre-recorded NPC voice, or re-recorded, I guess. And so they're just using that name brand. And it'll be interesting to see, because there's already Charity. We've talked about that a few times on the cast. Charity that have used celebrities to get attention, like having some of the MCU actors play D&D, or just trying to attract people. And that's always been kind of a thing, is to use, celebrity appeal or star power to get people to pay attention to actual plays. So it continues. And this sounds like a real raising of the level of quality and everything. So I definitely want to check out how this sounds, especially with the description of the production and the orchestra and everything that goes into it. It could be really amazing. So we will see. So Dark Dice podcast. And going back to a topic. So we had talked previously about Alan Dean Foster, the novelist that had written novelizations of the Star Wars. I think he ghost wrote like the actual first novelization for A New Hope, and wrote Splinters of the Mind's Eye, the sequel that before they even knew there was going to be a sequel or what that was going to be, he wrote a sequel novel to the original Star Wars film. And so we've heard about his struggles negotiating with Disney. And so this all falls under the hashtag DisneyMustPay. So what's happened when his kind of difficulties were brought to light, what's happened is the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America and several other writing guilds have formed a DisneyMustPay joint task force. So they named it, of course, after the Twitter hashtag. And that will include some people you may know, like Neil Gaiman, Chuck Wendig, Tess Gerdeson, and Mary Robinette Kowal. So these are all people that have produced novels or written comics or something for Disney, not as, not work for hire, but, with the understanding that there would be royalties for the continued publication of those works. And like in Foster's situation, Disney is no longer honoring royalty contracts with writers that they've been receiving royalties for decades from works that they've done either on Star Wars, Aliens, all the different things that Disney has acquired. So yeah, between 2012 and 2019, Disney has been acquiring quite a few things, and they have discontinued paying royalties. So recently, Alan Dean Foster wrote, I think on social media, that the issue with Disney regarding back royalties has been resolved. Further news relating to this matter will be released shortly to the public. So things, they said they have moved towards a mutually agreeable conclusion. So Disney is making good on back royalties, and who knows what the agreement is for the future. But what many of the people understood and what they were told that had previously worked with Disney once this acquisition was made for, Alien and Predator, Spider-Man, Indiana Jones, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Star Wars. There's a ton of properties that people have written for. Disney just said royalties don't transfer. And I don't know, if that's the case, but that's the position they're taking. And, they have the in-house legal staff to kind of enforce that position. So the group, the Joint Task Force, is their main concern, or kind of one of the big things that they're working with, is identifying the authors whose royalty payments may have been missed as a result of this acquisition integration. So they're going to work hard and I think collectively they have a much better chance of getting some attention. And it's a good sign if Foster did get his back royalties paid, because he is the name when you think of novelizations of kind of famous properties, and especially Star Wars. He is the name you think of. So it's good that they made good with him, and so we will see what happens in the future. And it's just messy. I mean, we haven't really had this before, where one large company is just swallowing up so many familiar properties. I mean, they have basically every children's IP you can think of, any kind of teen-friendly IP. Disney has just swallowed all of that up over the years. So if their position is that they don't owe anybody anything for all the previous work, that's pretty miserable. So we will see what success they have with getting people paid their royalties. And yeah, it's just a really odd position, and it makes Disney look not great, because I would think that would make people in the future much less interested in working with them, knowing that at any time they may change their position about what they're going to pay you, or what your work was worth. All right. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, and it's really too bad that Chris isn't here. I mean, none of this is very Chris friendly, so it would have been an eye-rolly live stream, I'm sure. But we just heard on social media that the Dungeons and Dragons reboot has begun filming. So there was a still image on Twitter, I believe, of a clapper with Dungeons and Dragons on it, and I think the director posted "The campaign begins" on that was the caption underneath that photo. So this movie is scheduled for a March 2023 release. So I guess things have been cleared out anyhow, because we had a whole year of no theatrical releases. or just, a few. And so, yeah, and this movie, it's been kind of knocking around since 2013. Like this actual reboot has been in the works. And first it was under Warner Brothers. And I guess it's good it's not under Warner Brothers because they're on their kick of everything should go straight to digital, straight to HBO Max. So they, the rights moved over then to Paramount. And so it's been lingering there. Wow, ever since that development. But then, as we talked about in December of 2020, they started to announce the cast. So they started to attach actors to things. So they already had the producer, directors. It's like a directing team, I guess. But Chris Pine in the lead role, and then also Regé Jean-Page and Michelle Rodriguez, Sophia Lillis, and Hugh Grant as the villain. And just recently they announced Justice Smith as an unannounced role. So we don't know what undisclosed role. So we don't know what that's going to be yet, but we have some faces to attach to this. So it's a little odd. I mean, we don't know what these rights are. So the obviously the rights for the original movies, like the Jeremy Irons movie and those sequels, and I think some straight to video sequels that were made in the past, didn't seem to have the complete rights, and they maybe just had the rights to use the name Dungeons and Dragons. And I'm not sure, I think there was a dragon and maybe a beholder in one of the films, but there's a lot of, things created by D&D that may not be part of this license. And without that, I don't mean like named characters and things that could really make this interesting. If we have known actors trying to, portray these characters that have been established throughout and are getting more and more well-known in 5th edition, that would be a great thing to actually see. And then it would be a setting, because if they're using the default Forgotten Realms setting, there are those characters in, Waterdeep and other places that we already know that you could show. And I guess they could just, mention them for fan service, but it would also be good to see actors portray those characters. I don't know though. And maybe there's enough lore and enough story that it'd be very difficult to, kind of decide what they're going to do. If you specifically went to make a Dragonlance movie or something, I guess there would be a lot more. You can understand what part of the story you'd be telling. But when you're telling something that has all kinds of random books and then adventures and things with those characters, maybe that's a little difficult. And there also isn't any clue yet if this will be completely in world, in Forgotten Realms setting. So we're seeing a fantasy movie, or we're going to be moving between, the real world and the fantasy world, or what they're going to be doing. So there obviously some kind of script, and there's people have been cast in various parts, and it's an odd cast, and it seems like they may be pandering to kind of our expectations, the low expectations of that original film, because if they can't cast Hugh Grant as the villain, then the expectation may be kind of a Jeremy Irons type campy, scenery chewing performance. So we'll see, and we'll see how much winking there will be towards the previous versions. I don't know. It just seems really strange to kind of waste the popularity, because I think you're not going to have another time where people know that brand, the technology exists to actually bring that to the screen, and you can cast recognizable faces to actually play characters known in that setting. I don't think we're going to have another time like that. There's going to be a lot less interest in this setting possibly in the future. So yeah, this is going to be a sad kind of wasted opportunity if they don't do something interesting with it, because I'm sure Hasbro is seeing it as a way to bring people into the game. But who knows? I mean, who knows what that's going to mean as far as what kind of story they're going to tell. And if they just do, because they've already done, wasn't there a Battleship movie? And there's been a couple of odd, taking Hasbro board game properties and trying to make them, kind of like Disney was doing at their rides. They were doing Haunted Mansion and Jungle Cruise or whatever. They're trying to make stories out of their rides. If they're just going to do that, then Yeah, who knows? It may be such a waste of time, and at a time when movie production and everything is still so strange. You don't know if things are going to be completely back to normal, or if movie theaters, will ever recover completely. So we'll see. So yeah, an odd kind of missed opportunity, possibly. Just from the sounds of it, it doesn't sound like like anything very exciting or very fun to wasn't solved. We didn't. Yeah, there we go. So we had a totally freeze-free stream last week, almost halfway. Well, this will be an audio podcast then, so I apologize for the freeze there. But yeah, it's hard to keep an eye on notes and that video at the same time, so apologies for that. So it's a beautiful freeze as well. All right. So yeah, that is all for this week. So hopefully Chris will be back soon and we can pull this off without the technical glitches. But if you would like to see more, please visit our YouTube channel and like this video, except for the freezing. You don't have to like that. Like or subscribe also to the channel if you want to get notifications of future streams and everything that we're doing. But but I apologize for the technical difficulties again. You can also follow us on Twitter at Upturned Table and visit upturntable.com, where we post all of the things we've been doing from various sources. So the live streams and as well as previous podcast episodes, our lore series based on the Mutant Chronicles, and everything that we've been doing. And there's also a Patreon, so visit patreon.com/upturnedtable to help us do this a little bit better. Yeah, unfortunately, I thought our freezing days were over, but yeah, that's a shame. Anyhow, if you're listening to the audio podcast, thank you so much. And please, if you'd like to see what this looks like weekly, it's done as a live stream, which is actually, why we have the technical issues. But it's done as a live stream every Friday around lunchtime, Japan time, so in the evening on Thursdays, North American time. And we'll do this again next week. So thanks for listening, and hopefully things will be back to normal next time. So see you then. Goodbye.